Rev.
Run against violence.
Welcome to Season 3 of the Rev podcast.
This year's theme is Caring Conversations.
We acknowledge the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on.
I think it's really important to, when we're listening to people, is to dig deep and be present and not let things slide. And so, I remember doing an exercise with a girl one day, and we're using a tool, and she said in one of it's a thing called the three houses, and one of them is House of Dreams. So, what would you like to, do or have when you grow up? And sometimes they're quite fanciful answers, and it would be easy to go, I'll just, that's a cute answer. But this particular girl said, I would like to be able to fly. And I said, so tell me about why you would like to fly. And she said, so I could get to school on time.
Oh,
And, and so that then provided the platform to go, that's a real value of hers. She's hating not getting to school on time. She loves school. But that then became an opportunity to go when, because sometimes I would always ask children if what we've done with them, they would be happy for me to show their parents. And so it was an opportunity to say to the parent, when we did this, she said this. And initially the mum had a laugh and went, oh yeah. And I said, then I asked her why. And she said that she wanted to get to school on time. And then that became an opportunity to talk about how do we make that happen? Because clearly this is upsetting her. Clearly this is impacting her with her peers, with her education. How can we partner together around, and you could see the shift in the parent as they move from this place of, what a cute answer, to what's actually being said by my child.
Hello, I'm Patty Kikos and welcome to the latest interview with Brenton Pobjie. There's so much I can tell you about him that we didn't get a chance to cover during our chat, such as his passion for travel, the fact that he's a wedding celebrant, and how he loves dogs but doesn't actually have one. His stories of why he has the extraordinary desire to really hear his clients are breathtaking. In fact, he received an award from the DCJ Aboriginal Working Group for his work with Aboriginal families and his capacity for deep listening. Brenton once spent a year participating in 12 different events for 12 different charities and raised over $9,000. He loves to exercise, but he's also a gaming nerd who enjoys watching movies. He tells me that he has the unusual combination of being incredibly clumsy, but also has good reflexes, so I guess he's constantly nearly breaking things. But as the final episode for this season, Brenton takes us on a journey that traverses a deep tragedy that affected his family, the special connection they had with the Salvation Army, the youth work that led to his role in a rehabilitation school that ultimately segued into his career-defining moments within child protection. This is an episode where you might want to take some notes or refer to our transcript because Brenton will share some really helpful resources such as the 3 House tool and the Safe House tool that anyone can use to empower children and give them a voice. It gives them the choice to determine what their priority is and also gives you an opportunity to seek their permission as to whether it's okay for us to share this information with anyone else. I learned so much and I have a feeling you'll feel the same after listening.
I feel like it's a privilege, and it's humbling that I would have a story that's worth listening to or being told. So I think that's a part of what I find fascinating about being invited to do this. Yeah, it's great. It's a real privilege.
You don't just have one story, you have many stories. You've got cautionary tales and you've also got some tips for so many people that don't have your qualifications or wealth of experience. So I think the privilege is very much ours.
No, it's nice.
So, Brenton, do you have a favourite memory of your childhood that you might sometimes still feel a little bit nostalgic about?
That's an easy thing to identify.
Okay.
It revolves around wherever my grandma, my mother's mother, my grandma Gilbert, was. So whether that was up in Coffs Harbour or in Grafton, being around her was a place of grounding, of calm. She modelled for me a fun loving relationship with my grandfather. She was warmth. There was love wherever she was. And whilst I didn't recognize it at the time, she was definitely my place that I could sense and experience the memories of my mother. And that she was what still represented the memories of my mother, who died when I was 9. But she's my favorite.
I didn't realize that your mum had passed away when you were little.
Yeah, so we were in a car accident. There was us as a family of 4. My father was driving. My mother died instantly. My sister was 3 and had significant head sort of injuries. And and I had some significant injuries as well, but not as much. It was significant. And a part of the story that is my story, I guess, is that I, for most of my life until the last 5-6 years, didn't have the opportunity to integrate her story into my life. And so she was absent, she wasn't spoken about. And so it's been the last 5 or 6 years I've been integrating her back into my life. So remembering her birthday, remembering the day that she died, remembering her on Mother's Day, and have become more integrated as a person as a result of it.
Has that been significant for your journey of grief and bereavement?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think we do grief and loss well in Australia, and it's a part of our culture. And so definitely it was a time when I don't think my dad had the resources or capacity to deal with his trauma and loss around that. We were talking about a time where there's a major car accident and there's no mobile phones, you're waiting for ambulances. It would have been, I can't imagine how dark, and I cannot remember. I have no memory of the incident itself, but definitely it was also a time where other adults, uncles, aunties would, you didn't interfere in other families' business. And so I've had to go seeking those stories. I've had to ask my uncles questions. I've had to go back to my father. I've had to find friends. So, for example, my auntie Helen is someone who I found out used to have coffee with my mother every week. And so she has become a part of my life, and she's been a source of stories and recollection. So I've had to go hunting, but it's been restorative, and I've become more whole.
It's interesting that you say you didn't do this until the previous 5 or 6 years. Would a part of that be because you almost weren't able to process such a big thing?
I think I lacked the knowledge or understanding of why or how to. So it was having the right people come back into my life. My current partner is someone that has recognized that I was spending a lot of time with either my foot on the accelerator or my foot on the brake. And so has encouraged that journey of exploration. And, I've had some good counseling and seen a psychologist, and have taken the steps necessary to, I don't think I understood where I fit in the world. I didn't understand where I fit in my family. And it was only when I started to understand who my mother was. And a part of what we might tap into later is what I understood as to who I was and why I was. I thought it had to do with my faith worldview. What I've come to understand is that those 9 years were instrumental in shaping who I am. And I now understand who I am most like, and a part of the DNA literally that makes up, that who I am.
And are you more like your mum than your dad, do you think?
From everything I understand, I'm very much like my mother, yes.
How extraordinary. Well, you, I know, grew up in a family that was part of the Salvation Army. And before we get to that, what was the segue that connected your dad initially to that organization?
Sure. So my grandfather was someone who struggled with alcohol, and as a result was a man who chose to use violence. And he would beat my grandmother, that's my grandmother on my dad's side, Grandma Barlow. And my dad would retell stories of having to sleep with a knife under his pillow. So sleeping with this, his own trauma, I guess, this fear. And so he tells the story of how there was a woman from the Salvation Army who built a relationship with my grandma, and then there was an opportunity one night for them to escape in the middle of the night and leave Queensland. And
So it was your grandma, your dad, and did he have other siblings as well?
5 siblings, yeah.
5 in total, 5 with your dad?
6 all up, yeah. And so they were able to escape that experience of violence. And so my dad would talk about how he owes his life in a lot of ways, and to the Salvation Army. And so he became a Salvation Army, what they call officer or a minister. And so he has committed his life to that movement or that organization.
It sounds like you grew up in a family where you were given strong foundations of, I don't know, I'd probably say social justice and standing up for the poor, the underprivileged, the oppressed even. Did it then become a natural extension of the work that you then sought to do?
Yeah, I think even in a voluntary capacity, I was working with, even when I first finished school, to be honest, I was quite lost. There were hints along the way that something was inside me that I needed to help others, or had a desire to help others. When it was talked to me about what I wanted to do when I left school, I said I wanted to be a taxi driver. Now on the surface, people know insults to taxi drivers, but the feedback I would receive from family was, well, no, that's not what you want to do. Why would you want to be a taxi driver? But if there were opportunities to be curious, if someone had taken the opportunity to explore what that was about, it was about being with people. It was about going on a journey with people. It was about taking people places and serving. And so that was evident through some of the volunteer work that I was doing. I ran a basketball program for kids in the street around where the church was at the time, and I was involved in leadership in the youth group that was there. But I ended up working for an insurance company. I finished the HSC, had no idea what I wanted to do. Someone from family encouraged me that I wanted to go to uni and do a Bachelor of Economics. So I went back and did the HSC a second time. Halfway through went, that's not me. That's not what I want to do. But went and worked for an insurance company for a while. So, yeah.
So did you not finish your HSC? Did you leave school?
Oh, no. I did the HSC once, and then, but I was incredibly social at school. And so didn't study and just, passed everything, but just scraped through.
Oh, so you passed but didn't get into uni. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I didn't even apply to uni.
I love it.
Yeah. And so it was, so they thought, oh, you should do the HSC again, try and get into uni. But again, just completely lost. But definitely there was that, undercurrent of, I think a part of the trauma, I guess, that I was talking about earlier with the loss of my mother. I was lost for, a lot of my life. But definitely that, look, there was evidences throughout when I was working for the insurance company. I started off in customer service, but then finished up in a role of conservation officer.
What does that mean?
Well, it's funny because basically I was in a role where people would call up and they would talk about wanting to cancel their insurance policy. And my job was to talk them through that and to hopefully lead them to a place where they decided to keep it. And I was one of the most successful conservation officers there because I had a 98% success rate. But what I was doing is I was sitting and listening to people, understanding, what their concerns were, and sitting with them and finding solutions. And so even then there was something, that was ticking away. And so the opportunity came along to be a full-time youth worker based in a church. And so that gave me the beginning avenue to start working in the area of the social field and supporting and working with other people. When I listened to the original podcast around these caring conversations, I couldn't help but think that caring conversations happen through curiosity. That I think a lot of the meaningful conversations that I have always start with curiosity.
Tell me about your time as a youth worker. I know that you've said you worked in New South Wales, you worked in Canberra, even in Queensland, and it was mostly in a coaching, mentoring, and maybe even practitioner role with the Salvation Army. I'd love to know about the things that you learned because, are my calculations correct? Would you have been in your 20s when you embarked on that youth worker role?
Yeah, I was around the age of 23 and in that role till I was about 33. So yeah, I think while I was operating in all those three states at the one time, so at the time it was known as the Eastern Territory for the work of the Salvation Army, and I think whilst a lot of obviously the goals of my work was to help youth workers set goals to be strategic. Sometimes I'd always try and dedicate maybe half an hour to listening to where they're at and sitting with them and checking in with how they're going. But sometimes those 2 hours would end up being just sitting and listening.
So, are you referring to you training other youth workers or working as a youth worker with the youth?
Oh, no, training other youth workers. Yeah, so whether they were in a voluntary capacity or a paid capacity, I would enter into this coaching arrangement where we would meet monthly. And so that would be, the goal of that was to help them set goals and be strategic in what they're doing. And but it was definitely a pastoral role as well in the context of trying to help them last and thrive. It's not about surviving, it's about thriving. And so the things that I learned in that role was that, people ultimately just want to be cared for. They want to be heard. They want to be nurtured. They want to be encouraged. Things that, I want for myself. And I think the best training environments, because, you would run weekend training events or week-long training events. I think the best training environments are the ones where you recognize and honor. People talk about respect, but for me, it's about honor, where you recognize and honor the expertise in the room, not the expert at the front of the room.
Tell me more about that, because that seems very interactive, engaging, and it seems like it's got a lot of collaboration in there.
Look, one of the very first things that I would do at the beginning of any training event was I would get the small tables to calculate, how many years people have been working with youth and get those tables to tally and feed back to me. And so, for example, after getting that, I would go, I want to recognize that there's over 250 years experience of youth work in this room. And that whilst, I may be conducting the training, that this is an opportunity to hear from each other and so really come at training from a place of humility, where whilst you might have a theory and a skeleton of how youth work can be undertaken, these people have different lived experience, things to listen to, things to share. And so it's always really important it's the same as when you go into a family's home, if you're working with DCJ, that you recognize that there's been a journey that has been existing before you get there, culture that's been existing before you get there, and that it's a privilege to be let into someone's home. Whether you're there under government legislation or not, I would always leave at the end of being with a family and say, thanks for letting me in your home, So, yeah, but anyway.
Well, I just want to unpack that for a little bit, because you had to be there because it was your legal obligation, but you really honored the fact that they did open their homes to you and welcomed you. And you're right, it is an honor. It's an honor to be in someone's home, and it's an honor to listen to somebody's story. So it sounds like the concept of listening is vital, and you've already talked about that, but it sounds like networking is also important, because isolation would be really unhealthy and potentially dangerous if you're navigating a situation that's unsafe or precarious.
Yeah, look, I think when I think about isolation and networking, I think about in the context of what I've learned in the youth work training space is that's what would cause people to burn out, to struggle, to make poor decisions. that, that was why sometimes those coaching appointments would be just sitting and listening for 2 hours, as to what people are going through, because being heard means that they can continue on in that journey, because they might be out in rural New South Wales somewhere, and you've turned up, once a month for 2 hours, but it's having someone that they can journey with on that.
Especially if they didn't have anybody else to speak to. I mean, I can't help but notice something. I want to make note of the fact that you had some very good active listening skills during a time in your life when you were 23 to 33, when most of us are usually more concerned about what our response is going to be, and we tend to interrupt, and we tend to like to retort or retaliate, and sometimes even share our own stories. What's your best tip about how to listen in a way that's very, not just mindful, I would say soulful?
I guess for me, I would have to say there's two things. One is it probably, I need to recognize and be transparent, and say probably one of the big life struggles that I've had is the use of my own voice, giving space for what I want, what I need, how I feel. I have definitely been someone that has cruised along in life, making sure everyone else is happy. So I have had to learn the importance of using my own voice, especially in the context of relationships with other people at various levels, because I was someone that was always just trying to make sure everyone else is okay. But when you do that, you negate the opportunity for other people to love you, because they don't know how.
Yes.
You aren't really a useful participant in a relationship if you're not sharing what your needs are and what you want. So in some ways, that foundation of listening was what I was doing all the time. So I haven't ever reflected on that until this moment, but that's definitely there. But I think I'm gonna acknowledge my mother, because I know that she was someone that other people, like my uncle described her as someone that when she walked in the room, she would light up the room, and when she left it, you would feel less for her leaving. But one of the things I know about her in the stories I've heard is that she would listen. And I imagine that was modeled for me. But also I think they are skills that I picked up along the way around the importance of listening. Because, I mean, the reality is, if you want to, especially in the context of coaching, for example, if you want to understand context, you can only do that through listening. You have to remove assumptions. You have to pause, reflect. And I think also some of the counseling courses I've done through the years have also set the foundation for the importance of listening well, and being comfortable with that, the awkward silence, that silence is okay. It's not the enemy.
True that. I mean, this might have partly been a trauma response. It might be part of your personality. It might be that you were a parentified child. It could be a number of things, but some behind the scenes that many of our Ravers listening today won't necessarily know is that in our previous conversations, you've often said, hey, and if I'm not the right person, it's okay. And I've said, oh, you're the right person, all right. You're not getting out of this interview. So I feel like it's important to mention this. Now, you participate in many events, Brenton, including the yearly RAV Challenge. Tell us about your dedication to the polished man that you have each year.
Yeah, I guess I discovered the Polished Man program, or like fundraising event, annual event, at the same time that I was involved in the behaviour school that I was working in the Hunter. And so it married really well in the context of a visible way to speak out or raise conversations around violence against children and women. And so for those who don't know, the Polished Man campaign sees you polish a nail in any particular color. Blue tends to be the standard one, but it's specifically encouraging men who would not normally paint their nails to do so. And so the idea being that someone would notice that you have a nail polished, you don't normally have that done. Why are you doing that? And the opportunity to speak out against violence against women and children. I guess to speak out against maybe some of the more extreme examples of violence against women and children, like slavery and abuse. So, yeah.
It sounds like it provided an opportunity to plant a seed where they could participate. And I'm going to ask you about that behaviour school in a moment, because I know that you've also said they wanted you to paint their nails and it challenged masculinity. And initially they'd make fun of you, but then you'd respond with why you were doing it and things changed. Tell us about the school. Was it a school opportunity before a juvenile setting? So, for example, a chance to reset challenging behaviours? Because I know when we've chatted offline, you've mentioned that the ratio was 3 students to 4 staff. So I'm intrigued to hear more about how we can transform the educational landscape.
Yeah, as to how we transform the educational landscape, that's another podcast for another time with extensive experts in the area other than me. But certainly the context for the school was boys and girls who weren't able to continue to exist in the mainstream school setting for whatever reasons, behaviours or an inability to support. And, a lot of these children had experienced trauma. They were potentially children in care, living in not even with carers, but in, what we call TCA. So, where there are workers that they have workers during the day, workers at night. So, yeah.
So out of home care.
Yeah. So lots of different contexts, but essentially, trauma and quite difficult. All the foundations that would make standard learning impossible and difficult. And so they would come into this school setting rather than, this would be the next step before juvenile detention, ideally never making it there. Some students would go into, juvenile detention, but then come back into our setting and continue to, be cared for in that context. So, so it was, and there was in a classroom of, for example, if you had 3 students, there would often be 4 staff in that room. And so it allowed for one-on-one, support and engagement in that setting. It was, and trying to work through creatively, how do you support them to learn? So if one of them's into motorbikes, well, then you do your maths, you do your English around, what they're into, creating that unique learning space, having a therapy dog, having, a yarning circle at the beginning of the day, having a reward system where if they, behavior was sufficient during the week, that they would get to go and do laser zone with staff or, things like that. So finding ways to really engage them in a different way. Yeah.
Tell me about the work of Nathan Wallace, because I know it really influenced you. It was all about didactic relationships, and you took an idea where you could spend 20 minutes a day with them doing whatever they wanted.
Yeah, there's an amazing, Nathan Wallace is an incredible educator around neuroscience, and he talks about the first 1,000 days of a child and how if there isn't that didactic relationship, so essentially if we have a healthy growing context when we're developing in that first 1,000 days, then we will have a healthy attachment to at least one adult, and that forms the foundation for neural pathways and healthy engagement and establishment. So he can say it much better than I can, but that's essentially it. So we initiated an experiment where we would reflect on how the children would leave the classroom to come and spend time with me and how they would return, so that there was a period of assessment as to whether we would continue to work in this way. So the idea being, come and spend 20 minutes with me. We can do whatever you want. And the only 3 rules are: it can't hurt you, it can't hurt me, and it can't hurt anyone else. And ideally doesn't break anything. But that was it. Would you like me to give you some examples?
I would love to, because I think it fits in really beautifully with our caring conversations theme, because I know that there are many people listening who are thinking, I could do this.
So this boy was 14, and when offered the opportunity, he said he just wanted to play basketball. So when we first did this for 20 minutes, it was quite fascinating to see him almost fervently chase the ball down, like he didn't want me to touch the ball. So I couldn't even return it to him. He would take a shot and then chase after the ball. So for 20 minutes, I just stood there. If it happened to come near me, I could sort of get it back to him. But there was almost this possessiveness and hunger that he sort of, like a survival instinct, where this is my time and I'm going to do everything I can. The next time we went, he was happy for me to return the ball to him. The third time we did it, every now and again, he would say, "Oh, you can have a shot if you want." I'd have a shot, and then he'd continue. Then the next time, he was willing to play around the world, but I sort of was happy to sort of like let him win. And then the last time that I got to do that with him, it was over a number of sessions in a row. He was quite happy to lose. Like, it wasn't a problem for him, and he was really comfortable turn taking. The transformation in just those 4 or 5 sessions of 20 minutes. One of the biggest things that happened was the last time I did that with him. He walked off and he walked past another teacher, and the teacher came straight up to me and said, "Oh, did you hear what he said?" And I went, "I didn't hear him say anything." But apparently as he walked off, he said thanks. And so, yeah, it was incredible to see such a simple concept have a massive impact in the context of our relationship. And the way that he went from like this, almost this craving lost child that needed to hold on to this, to just being willing to turn take and be appreciative. It was incredible. One of the things that I would do when working with children and with parents in the context of my work with DCJ is I would often ask them what's called the magic question. And I would say to them, if you could wake up tomorrow and one thing about your world has changed, what would that be? And that answer would often provide an indicator as to where we can hopefully go next, what change they actually want to see in their life. And some of the pain and hurt that they might be feeling around their own context, and maybe their own hopelessness, to instigate that change. So can we partner around that?
That's a beautiful segue, isn't it? Because anyone can initiate that response, that caring question. If there was a magical way to end something, or you wake up and you have something tomorrow, what would it be?
Yeah. So sometimes that answer might be more money, and then that provides an opportunity to say, well, what would that solve? What's the actual I think it's really important to, when we're listening to people, is to dig deep and be present and not let things slide. And so I remember doing an exercise with a girl one day, and we're using a tool, and she said in one of it's a thing called the 3 houses, and one of them is House of Dreams. So, what would you like to, do or have when you grow up? And sometimes they're quite fanciful answers, and it would be easy to go, "Oh, just, that's a cute answer." But this particular girl said, "Oh, I would like to be able to fly." And I said, "Oh, so tell me about why you would like to fly." And she said, "Oh, so I could get to school on time."
Oh,
And and so that then provided the platform to go, that's a real value of hers. She's hating not getting to school on time. She loves school. But that then became an opportunity to go, when, because sometimes I would always ask children if what we've done with them, they would be happy for me to show their parents. And so there's an opportunity to say to the parent, "Oh, when we did this, she said this." And initially the mum had a laugh and went, "Oh, yeah." And I said, then I asked her why. And she said that she wanted to get to school on time. And then that became an opportunity to talk about, how do we make that happen? Because clearly this is upsetting her. Clearly this is impacting her with her peers, with her education. how can we partner together around, and you could see the shift in the parent as they move from this place of, oh, what a cute answer, to what's actually being said by my child. So yeah.
What's the name of this tool again?
This one is the three houses, where you have literally out frames of three different houses. And again, there are ways that you could use this where you could dictate and go, we're going to use this tool and we're going to do house of good things first. And, but there's three houses. One is house of good things, house of worries, and house of dreams, or future house. And so when using this tool, first of all, I would ask the child if it's okay if we did it, and I'll explain it to them. So again, giving them back power, because children are often powerless and don't have a voice. And so it's important that we give them that. And then I would say to them, having explained the three houses, which one do you want to talk about first? And then they would choose. And so again, giving them back that power, and it's really important.
And empowerment, yeah. And then?
And it would be, you would then sort of find out about the things that are good in their life, because we can go in assuming that their world is terrible, but through listening we can find out what are good things that are going on in their life, and then in listening to them, that they can start to share maybe some of the things that they are worried about, some of the things that aren't going so well. And again, the house of future dreams or hopes gives us those other insights, like I want to fly, or and so and look, it's a small thing, but even being creative, and a child saying to me, they said to me, I don't like the house of worries. And I said, well, why don't you like the house of worries? And they said, it's red. And I said, well, what color would you like the house of worries to be? And they said, oh, I'd like it to be the house of good things. I went, okay, well, let's just rename them, So just listening and being adaptive when you work with children. But that was a great tool amongst some of the others that I used to use.
I'm going to ask you about some more of your tools when I ask you about your role in DCJ. But before I do that, I feel like I want to ask you, how do you keep yourself from being triggered and even reactive when someone might potentially be verbally abusing you? Because I know you've worked in schools that were located in predominantly lower socioeconomic areas. And you've said to me once, you said your benchmark was, did I make a difference to one person today? But at the behaviour school, I imagine that this wouldn't have worked so well for you. So was it important for you to ensure that you also had regular formal supervision, possibly like what you facilitated for the youth workers that you trained previously?
Yeah, 100%. And it's actually out of that I shifted my goalposts. So, at the public school, at the end of every day, did I make a difference to one person today? And the answer was always yes. It was fantastic. Couldn't be living a better life. It was after my first day at the behavior school, I just sort of went, oh my goodness, this is such a tough context. We're eating around in walkie-talkies. I'm being called everything under the sun. And so in supervision, I just was sharing that, and they said, oh no, the benchmark needs to be completely different in this context. And the benchmark became, for success, did I turn up? Did I get out of the car, and did I go inside?
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's not about what that is actually about, is about consistency.
Yeah.
Am I being someone who is consistent in these children's lives? Am I there no matter what they throw at you, no matter what they say? Am I resilient, patient, calm? Because chances are they're trying to prove that I'm another adult that is there to harm them or give up on them.
Yes.
And so I'm not going to be that person. The way I'm making a difference that day is, it may not be visible or spoken about, but I know I was successful because I was consistent.
Yeah. And in less formal situations where we are reaching out to someone, maybe in our church group, maybe because we teach dance or run soccer clubs or football clubs,
And maybe we're having difficult conversations where we don't have that formal supervision that's awarded to workers like ourselves. I think this emphasizes the importance of being able to debrief with someone that you trust. But I can't help but also mention knowing who your community and family are, but also our own self-care. And for many people, that will look like very different things. For some, it'll be journaling, exercising. For some, it'll be reflection, it'll be prayer, it would be counseling or psychology sessions. And I think that it's important to know what's going to fuel your cup. So I had someone back in the day when I was teaching yoga say, oh, I'm just not spiritual, and I don't know that I could ever connect to those things that you yogis do. And I said, I don't know about that, because we live in a beach community and you go surfing every day. So what you do on that board in that water is more spiritual than I ever do in a class. So I think it's important to really recognize that there are different things that will fuel your cup at different junctions and times in your life. Do you reckon we can head to you moving into your role with the artist formerly known as DOCS and is now known as the Department of Communities and Justice, DCJ? You worked as a caseworker for 5 years in both the preservation department and in the assessment space. So first responder after the helpline. And you said that you enjoyed that more than the preservation space. Can you tell us a little bit about those roles? Because I know that you'll also be able to share some really helpful tips that all of us listening today will be able to implement quite easily into our everyday interactions with those that we love.
Probably one of the things I was passionate about was making sure that dad's voices were heard, as well as children's voices were heard. But also passionate about challenging men's behavior, so men who are choosing to be violent. And so, yeah, that was a byproduct, is that, I remember a dad saying to me, when initially for, weeks and weeks, he would not let me in his home, and through being creative and patient and even pushing the envelope, that we at one point, he just said, invited me into his home. And caseworkers, we hadn't had a chance to get in there. And then standing in his home and him being emotional and actually crying. And after all that, that if I wasn't patient, if I didn't listen, if I didn't seek to understand, that I would have perhaps on the surface gone, I've got a parent here who's resisting, who is refusing to engage. And so even that language, that we were encouraged to use the language of we're facing challenges engaging, recognizing that often we're the block. And so once in the home, and to have this dad crying and then telling the story that this is the home in which he spent hours trying to resuscitate his father. Mm-hmm. And I go, I haven't just been led into a home. I've been led into his life and a traumatic event. And what a privilege that was.
I imagine many of your predecessors would have said that. They would have said, look, he's been non-responsive, non-compliant, even would have been a word that would have been used. So it took patience and persistence, and you saying, I'm not going anywhere, but every time I do show up, it's going to be in the very same respectful, and I dare say even reverent space that I'm going to project.
Well, yeah, that word honoring, I think, is the one that I tap into, that I really wanted to honor his story and his life. And I refused to go anywhere, but I refused to not be creative, and chose to really sort of work through how we could get there. Because we wanted the experience to be different. So so those things are really a massive privilege when you are allowed into someone's life, and working through that. So so I think listening is really key as a foundation for the work I used to do with DCJ.
Brenton, tell me how you'd put safety plans together with parents and children.
It would be really important in the context of, before going out to see a family, of trying to talk to as many family members as we could before going out, and a part of that was also not just rocking up, but actually calling the parents and saying, we need to come out, we need to have a chat, I want to understand how things are going for you, and asking permission to speak to the children at school and, why, and working with them, around a time that works best for them. Because the reality is, there would probably be days that you might rock up to my place and it's not my best day,
Yeah.
and so that even gave opportunity for families, like, I don't know, let's say the report is that the house is really unkept or untidy, but if you rock up and maybe there has been, but you give people the opportunity to go, well, yeah, it's been untidy, but that's not how we want to live. And so it's giving dignity back and going, this is how we actually want to live, So it's another evidence of their commitment to change. But in relation to safety planning, one of the things I was passionate about all the time is I would recognize verbally, if not just personally, that as a DCJ worker, you come in with lots of power, and talking openly with families about that. And so that I think it is changing, but there is a safety manual that we would use to assess whether we're meeting a danger. And I would always take 2 with me. And what I would do is, if I felt like we were meeting a danger, I would pull out 2 manuals, give one to the parent, talk to them about what it is and how it helps, why we have it, so that we don't just remove children because I'm having a bad day. And I would say, look, if you turn to page 17 and look at danger 5, let's read through that together. And, I would ask you, do you have any challenges around, reading or anything that might be an obstacle? No, let's read through it. And I would read through that danger, and I would say, I feel like we're meeting that danger today, but because you've taken the time to give power back to them, give them the information, they have the assessment process in their hands. I would always find that parents would go, yeah, I agree. We are meeting that danger. And
Wow.
then it was incredible. And it takes time. It's a long assessment, listening and doing that job well. But it also then meant that you could go, well, since we're meeting that danger, we need to put a plan in place that reduces our worry and negates our worry around that. How do we do that? Who do we bring in? And what's your plan? I want to give you some time to think, speak to people that, are in your family or your network. I want to give you the chance to come up with a plan that would mean that we don't worry about that for the next 3 days, and that we can then talk about how it becomes a more permanent plan. And so, I would go back to them and hear what their plan is and write that out and, work on that together and check in on them and check in on the network. But I've also had situations where we've met a danger and they've said, oh, I can't think of anyone that we can bring in, I can't think of a plan. And then I would also be transparent and say, well, I need you to know that if we're meeting a danger and we can't come up with a plan, then this is what it looks like. We do look at children coming into care, and I need you to know what that's going to be like. It's going to mean seeing your child once or twice a week for an hour, them being with someone else and not living with you. And even being transparent and honest about that dire consequence, if it needed to happen, would be enough for them to go, all right, we need to make this happen. So it was an incredible privilege to be honest and transparent with families and give them all the power and opportunity to start the process of change in that early stage of assessment.
2 things that I hear is your desire to empower someone. Like, this is your copy and I want to know your thoughts. And something you didn't say outright, and maybe I've misinterpreted it, but I can't help but notice that there's no rush. We're going to take the time it needs for you. And it might be different for each family, but your timing is your timing. I wonder if you can give me some other examples of some tools that you've found really helpful and stories to illustrate them.
Yeah, sure. there would be nothing more heartbreaking for me than preparing to go see a family. And as an example, I would read through previous safety assessments or risk assessments. And and this is an example, I was doing that because I owe it to the family to know what they've already shared and to not go out and ask them a question they've already been asked.
Yep.
And it actually gave me the opportunity to go out and say, oh, you've shared in the past that you haven't had postnatal depression. You've recently had a baby. How are you going this time?
Yeah.
It means I've shown them enough honor and respect to actually understand their story before I go out. However, this situation that we had been involved in their life 2 or 3 times before, and there were 6 children in the family, and we'd never spoken to the children. And so
you mean your predecessors had never spoken to the children?
The time there was no evidence in the assessments written that the children's voices were present.
Well, didn't you miss your calling to be a diplomat? Very diplomatic.
I'm not throwing anyone under the bus because the reality is I don't know the context of what may have been happening or anything else. So all I know is what is my job on my watch. My watch is to make sure I speak to the children. And so, yeah, look, people would know that when they came out with me that it could be a whole day affair because you take time. And you ask lots of questions, and you're curious, and you take time to listen. So, some of we call them secondaries who came out with me knew that they would have to warm up their wrists and fingers to take lots and lots of notes. But one of the tools that I use in listening to the voice of children is, along with the 3 houses, is the safety house, and I would often start with that. And basically, it's a skeleton of the house. You've got a roof, you've got you block your 4 walls, a garden path, and a fence. And you would talk through the house. And so you would first of all talk about the roof, and that represents what rules. You would ask the child, this is your house. What rules would you want to have in your house for you to feel safe? And often through that, they would say, oh, no fighting, no yelling, no hitting. And again, if you could just go with that and go, oh, that's what's happening to them, or that's what's going on in the home. Sometimes it was, but sometimes you'd say, so tell me about who hits in your house. And you go, oh, my brother hits me. It's the danger is you're assuming, making judgment. You go, oh, a parent's hitting you. Well, no, you're curious what happens, But it gives you a platform to understand context and what are the values of that child and what's happening for that child. You would then talk about who would you want to have live with you, and then go inside the block of the house. So you start to understand who are the safe people that this person has in their family, in their network. Maybe who have they left out? And then you would do on the path, you would talk to them about who are the people that you feel safe with, that you would want to come and visit you, but not live with you, but they'd go back to their own home. And again, you're starting to understand who's in the network, because they're all people that if you're meeting a danger, you can start to call on to help keep the children safe. And then the last part is the fence, and that is who do you not feel safe with, that you don't want in your home, and that you don't feel like they can even come and visit you. Sometimes it would be like random things like burglars, but sometimes a specific person would be named.
Like who?
So on this occasion, one example is the dad, or the stepdad. And so it was made really clear by this 12-year-old that the person that they didn't feel safe with was their stepdad. In the conversations with mom, she was, we were sharing our worries around the violence that's going on in the home and the impact on the children. And the mum said to me, if Peter, not the real name, if Peter wasn't feeling safe, he would tell me and I would leave. And it became an opportunity for me, because Peter had given me, permission to show both the stepdad and the mum the safety house, I gave me an opportunity to be really honest with the mum and say, he is telling you, he's told you that he does not feel safe with this person. And that became the catalyst for mum to start the process. We're able to speak to the maternal grandma and show her the safety house. And she was able to just suddenly come out with all these, I had worries for years. I've been, that they can come and stay with me, and so that tool became not only my tool for understanding the context of the child, but it became the voice for that child. And that then projected onto, that created change, because this 12-year-old was also brave enough to say, yeah, you can show my stepdad. And so it became something that I could sit down and go, how do you feel? Because, we do want to challenge men who choose to use violence. How does it make you feel when you talk about how much you love this person, that they don't see you as a safe person and want you, they've put you here and they haven't put you in the house. They haven't, and so that's just one, way that's a tool that I could use, and one example of how I could use it.
That is extraordinary. Well, that kind of rapport doesn't get built in an hour. No wonder you spent all day with some families.
Yeah, it's about really understanding context. And so, yeah, that's really important. We had a situation, we were worried about children's experience of violence in the home, went out to do the safety assessment, and the dad had left to go overseas for a period of 3 weeks. It would have been easy to assess the situation and go, things are safe, dad's not at home, we can come back later. Instead, what we chose to do was go, well, it happened yesterday. We're meeting a danger. And so we brought in that, that safety plan using the family network, both sides of the family. And it was even incredible to be contacting the other side of the family and having, uncles and aunties who are on the father's side saying, yeah, we share worries, And so even though the children were safe that weekend, we still put a safety plan in place as a practice run almost. And then we were going, okay, it's currently safe. Let's assess it when dad comes back. When dad came back, I had people from that network calling me saying, we know you are going out to assess today. If you need us, we are here, ready to go. We've already made plans if things go south. And so I loved the fact that we gave dignity to those children by going, things may be okay right now, but they may not be one day. Let's put this in place. Right. And to see the network do that themselves without our involvement was one of the days I was just really proud about what we do.
This is so incredibly important, because we can't have caring conversations on our own. We need to be collaborative as a community. And in a formal work situation, you were able to do that. And you were authorized to contact relatives and external family members. But as a community, it really highlights how important it is to rally and have people come on board and share their time, their resources. Brenton, you are fantastic. And I have a final question for you today. And it is, are you a solo walker, or do you like walking with company?
I'm going to be annoying, and I'm going to say both, and I know that I shouldn't, but
you can say whatever you want. It's your interview.
Look, I am definitely socially driven, and so I love cycling, walking, running with other people, because I know the benefits of exercise by itself, but also the benefits of being with other people. So I'm definitely someone who loves walking with other people. However, I also appreciate the discipline of doing it by yourself, and that space and time to process and reflect and maybe do some of the work that you need to do internally. So yeah, I'm both.
I like it so much. Guess what? I am as well.
It's great.
Depends on the time of day. Brenton, thank you so much. You've been amazing.
That's great.
And that is it for today, folks. I'm now going to pass the baton to our fabulous co-founder, Kiralee Deer, and she's going to share some amazing information about what RAV are up to behind the scenes. And if you found this episode to be helpful, please do share it with someone that you can think would benefit from hearing it. Liking, subscribing, but especially leaving us a 5-star review ensures that we give that algorithm a helping hand to get to the listeners that need to hear from us the most. Bye from us today.
Thank you, Brenton and Patty, for an insightful and empowering interview. It has been wonderful to listen to your depth of experience on how to hold caring conversations. We established that as this year's topic for the RAV podcast because our community asked for it. Many of us know we need to be having those uncomfortable conversations, but we feel completely out of our depth to do so. And many of us fear that if we have that conversation and do it badly, we're going to cause more trauma. We're going to cause more damage than good. Thanks to Brenton, we have a fantastic framework for thinking about those conversations, and also the other people who have contributed to the RAV podcast this year. We have ended up with an incredibly rich list of techniques and tools and ideas that we can all be using to have those conversations. I strongly recommend that you go back and listen to each episode again and again. I know I have already, and I will be listening to them many more times. And I will be sharing them with my community, with my friends, my work colleagues, anyone who I think can benefit from that information. Brenton, I particularly loved your statement that caring conversations begin with curiosity. And we saw that as a theme throughout these interviews. We need to just slow down and ask questions with an open mind rather than coming at it with a conversation already happening in our heads or assumptions or stereotypes. To be truly present. And we also know from the interviews in this series is that we need to slow down and take time and take tiny little steps. Caring conversations is a vital tool that we need to embed throughout all of our communities. When we learn to break that silence and do it well, we are going to be taking some massive steps forward, making solid progress toward that day when we can all live in communities that are free of family violence.
RAV.
Run against violence.